What if you could step away from every responsibility for 40 days? No emails, work calls, or guilt, and rediscover what truly makes your heart sing. Imagine this. A grant not only covers your duties while you're gone, but also gives you $25,000 to explore anywhere in the world. It covers airfare, ground transportation, lodging, meals, experiences, all of that. And the only rule? Disconnect completely and immerse yourself in things that make your heart sing. Over the next 40 days, I'll be sharing my journey with this exact challenge. So whether I'm snorkeling with sharks, hitchhiking in the back of pickup trucks, trekking across the Serengeti, tracking big game, struggling to breathe and not freeze to death on the top of a 20,000-foot mountain, or breaking bread with new friends from around the globe, I hope you'll join me on this journey. Thanks for joining me today on the SuperPumped podcast. I am excited that you are here. We are trying a little bit of a different format today. So we continue our series on winning the turnover battle. And if you can do that, you are going to unlock profits. You are going to make your company so much more viable, so much more fun for you, for your employees, for everybody involved, even your customers. These past few weeks, we've been working on talking about how do you recruit people and all the costs associated with recruiting great employees. And there is a lot that goes into that. If you look at the dollar signs, that's the biggest driver of costs. But where I see a lot of companies fumble the ball is as they get near the end of what they would call the recruiting process, they stop wooing the people they want to get on board. And one of the things that I see a lot is, while you decide that this person is the person you want to hire as a company, right? And so you're kind of at the end of this recruiting road. For that applicant, they may be in the middle of their job search or their employment search, or maybe even at the beginning. And so while you've found the one, they're sifting through many other potential suitors. And that's where I see a lot of companies mess this up, is they think that somehow because they've picked that employee, the employee has actually picked them. And when you're in this middle part between recruiting and onboarding, until you actually get them on board, you haven't done anything. So I see a lot of fumbling in this arrow right here between recruiting and onboarding. And so today I want to talk about that. Last week I talked about how in dating, you continue to put your best foot forward. You don't just assume that the person is going to love you forever because you had a couple of good inquiry dates, right? That's silly. So it's the same thing in this recruiting process. You want to continue to woo that person. Maya Angelou, brilliant woman, talks about how people will never forget how you make them feel. And in the business context, how you make your employees feel and how you make your applicants feel is how they are going to feel about your business. So in other words, if they feel positive and good vibes and excited about your business, your application process, they're going to feel good about your company versus all the other companies that are out there throwing recruiting pitches and signing bonuses and promising the moon, that kind of thing. How do we make people feel good? I've thought a lot about this, and I actually have something that doesn't cost you anything. It's very simple. That's not only going to make them feel good, it's also going to make you feel good in the process. If you are trying to recruit people, tell them when you get to the point of making an offer, okay, you found that Sally is the candidate you want. First and foremost, Sally's at the top of your job board, right? And you call Sally and you say, hey, Sally, it's Ben at SuperPumped Consulting, and we would really like you to come on board our team. At that point, Sally's still trying to sift through you versus everybody else. This is the step I want you to take. I want you, before that call, to go through why you picked Sally, because you had your reasons, right? Maybe Sally did a tremendous job at another company and spearheaded a project that you think is something you would like to see. Or maybe you have a new innovation or a new kind of business wing or, business unit you're launching. And Sally has done that before, right? So that's the reason you chose Sally. So let Sally in on that exact thing. I would call that praising, kind of telling Sally why she's awesome. Sally, here are 3 reasons why we picked you. The way you were able to launch that new product with XYZ company that you either currently are at or were at, that is what we're looking for. That was magnificent. We are very impressed with you. Think how Sally feels right now. Going back to this. How does Sally feel about your company when you say, boy, we really like that about you? And then you follow that up with a couple other things. We also like that you were with your current company for 7 years. You weren't just hopping from job to job to job. We love that loyalty, and we see a long-term future for you, Sally, here in this company in the same way that you were with XYZ company. If we can earn your trust, we would love to make this a long-term relationship with you too. So you're putting out that second thing. Then another thing is, if you've done your due diligence in this recruiting process, you have checked references. Don't just hire people without checking references. I know there's temptation to cut corners, right? Don't do that. Check the references, because you're going to learn exactly what you need to know about Sally. And there's a whole thing. We'll do a different podcast series on that aspect, because that's really drilling down, but man, is that important. When you come out of those reference checks, note things. Merle said blank, blank, blank about Sally. Or maybe one of the references said, oh, you have no idea how incredibly gritty Sally is. Sally was stuck on a mountainside for 31 days and managed to survive on berries and fish she caught in the wild. Or some story that wouldn't be on your resume or your CV, right? And so you tell Sally, wow, I talked to Merle and Merle was sharing this story. That is incredible. You are an amazing person. Again, how are you making Sally feel? Sally is eating this up. Sally is loving it. And it's genuine. These are genuinely the reasons you chose Sally, right? I can remember back in our cleaning business, and we had a woman, and she had applied, and she had worked prior to going on maternity leave and being a full-time mom. She had been the Dayton Daily News, back in Dayton, Ohio, Carrier of the Year. In other words, she was delivering newspapers. And that really impressed our team, because we thought, to be the Carrier of the Year, you think about the mail. We deliver rain, snow, sleet, and shine. Well, the newspaper's the same thing, except you're getting up at 2 and 3 in the morning, and you're having to assemble the papers. They don't tell you any of that, but there's a whole process to this. And then you've got to go around and get them out, and it could be snowing, it could be miserable, you're tired, or maybe you had a function the night before or something. So the fact that she was able to be the Carrier of the Year just blew us away. So when we went in and said, we would really like you to work for us, and we were really impressed that you were Carrier of the Year, she was like, oh, you noticed that? Because it was like buried at the bottom of her resume. We told her that, and we ended up getting her. And she was being heavily recruited by a number of companies. And to think that a cleaning company, you would think that isn't maybe anyone's top choice to work, right? But because we made her feel like we saw her, like we valued her, that was what helped get her on our team. So before you get into all the logistics of that, when you find the right candidate, the first thing you want to do is you want to double back to the reasons you want them on your team. You want to make them feel good. You want to validate them, affirm them, praise them for the work they've done, for their body of work previously. And then you want to begin to say that those are the kinds of things that at your company, at SuperPumped Consulting or Service Master of the Queen City or Salad Sage or In-N-Out Job or On the Spot or whatever that company is, that they have a home here. And that's how you start moving somebody from the recruiting process to actually onboard your team. A final caveat is this same thing, this finding things you love and admire and respect about your people, not only are you going to build this into your DNA in the recruiting process, I'm going to talk next time about how you build this into your onboarding process. And finally, how you build that into your retention. And if you can continue this over and over, lather, rinse, repeat, praise, affirm, woo, make them feel something, you will drive your turnover down. You will drive your retention up. And guess what? The profits will follow. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you feel good about our time together, and I hope that feeling brings you back next time to the Super Pumped Business Podcast. If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on Super Pumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. If you enjoyed today's show, I would be so grateful if you told your friends about it, and also if you subscribed or followed us so that you don't miss future episodes. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness. Thanks for joining me today as we continue our series on winning the turnover battle. And today, I want to talk about one of the times that I see employers fumble the ball. And that's that critical time when the recruiter or the HR person or whoever you want to call them, the person who engages with the outside world to get candidates, hands that employee, brand new hire, off to the onboarder or the trainer or the manager who is going to work with them. So often I see this process as super clunky. And if it's done wrong, you can lose them at that moment. We want you to win the turnover battle. We don't want you fumbling at any point along the way. So today we're going to talk about how do we do a clean, crisp handoff between the recruiter and the onboarder. When we think about the recruiting process, recruiting is the most money, right? Then the onboarding process, and then finally retaining. You still need to spend on that, but it's not as much. So if you fumble the ball in between these two things, you've lost a lot of money, right? In between recruiting and onboarding. What I talked about last week, just as a refresher, and if you missed it, go back to that episode. It's a fairly short one, but make the potential new hire or candidate, whatever you want to call them, the person you've chosen to join your company, make them feel good about themselves, about who they are, about what they bring to the table as an employee. And if you do that, they will begin to develop feelings of goodwill toward your organization. And that will help you be their employer of choice, the one they select out of all the people that are recruiting them. Because remember, if you're recruiting good people, so are a lot of other companies. And you may not be able to compete on benefits or maybe even pay or, all the different things. But if you make them feel some sort of positive way, you've got yourself a puncher's chance. And that is awesome. Last week, we talked about how you want to get into the space of why them, why they matter, that kind of thing. But as you begin that handoff, then you often, as the recruiter, are handing them off to their next person in your chain. Normally, the recruiter doesn't do the actual onboarding or training, maybe other than pop in a video or some kind of computer-based training for them. But generally, they come that first day. And this, if it's done well, they report to work that first day. And that same recruiter who they've already gotten to know, right, and feel good about, greets them, meets them, wherever that is, whether that's hopefully in the parking lot or the lobby or, on site at a particular location. So they meet them. But at that same time, what I would like your company to do is have that second person there. So that is the moment of introductions. There begins the handoff. So the recruiter is there. Thanks for coming, Sally. We're glad you joined our team. We're so excited to get you started today. And this is Jim. Jim is going to be working you through all this and working with you along the way. They shake hands. Nice to meet you, Jim. Nice to meet you, Sally. And then do you know what you do? You double back to why you hired them. So you say, as the recruiter, Jim, I know this is the first time you've met Sally, but I've gotten to know her. And here are some things we were really impressed with. And you go back through that list of things that you were impressed with Sally. Now, if you want extra credit on that, instead of naming the exact same 3 things that you told Sally over the phone when you were trying to give Sally the job offer and get her into your company, if you were to even come up with another different thing, a 4th thing or a 5th thing, think how great that's going to make Sally feel. It wasn't just those 3 things. My recruiter loves me for this and this too. Man, they are already feeling good about this company. They've barely walked into the lobby and you're already complimenting them and making them feel good. Think about the positive association already with your company. They've never gone behind the curtain. They've never done an ounce of work and already they're feeling good about you. So you review all that with Jim, the onboarder, the trainer, the manager, right? And then Jim is going to affirm them too. Wow, that's really cool. Tell me a little bit more about being the Dayton Daily News delivery person of the year. That sounds awesome. How cool was that? And then Sally can say more about that. Go back to this basic why you've selected them. This is a good handoff. So not only does Sally have good feelings about their recruiter, but now Sally has good feelings in connection with Jim. In the best case, the recruiter can then kind of gracefully ease out. And one way I like to do that is if you do a tour of the building, right? And the recruiter goes on that tour to a point, and that point is where that's the recruiter's office. And so then at that point, the recruiter says, Sally, this is my office. My door is always open. Anytime you have a question, I know Jim is your trainer, but anytime you need anything, my door is open. I would love to see you, just check in with you, help you out. And I'm going to bow out now. You are in great hands with Jim. And then the recruiter is able to get back to their office, get recruiting the next wave of great employees, and they're off and running with Jim. And they are feeling right now so good about things. They've been pumped up not only by their recruiter, but also by their new trainer. They've got a feel for where someone is. They feel like they've got a sense of support and belonging, people in the company that are pulling for them. This is really awesome, right? We're rolling here on the handoff. We're not fumbling between recruiting and onboarding at this point. Here is a critical piece. Jim, the onboarder, the trainer, the manager, has to impress upon them why the work they are about to embark on matters. Let that sink in for you. You need to tell them and explain to them and convey to them why what you have hired them to do matters. Because not only do people want to feel good about the workplace and how they feel when they go there, they want to feel that they're doing meaningful work. We all have an innate human just yearning that our work matters, that our life matters, that we have purpose in the larger cosmos, right? That we're not just cashing a check or doing some mindless thing, dig a hole, fill in a hole. Nobody wants that. That's not fulfilling, right? I'm going to give you 3 quick stories. In our coffee shop, we were considered an essential business. So we were able to be open during the pandemic, right? And you can imagine trying to get frontline fast food workers to work during the pandemic when people were scared, people were uncertain, people weren't sure they wanted to work. Plus, they also had stimulus money in their pocket, right? It was hard. That's a tall order. But one of the things we realized early on was our work mattered. Now, you may say, it's just coffee shop. It's just fast food. It's just, a breakfast burrito, right? So why would our work matter? Well, here's why it mattered. It mattered because all of the doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals, those healthcare heroes that were out on the front line, guess where they were coming through first thing in the morning to get started on their 12-hour shift, or some of them even longer shifts. They were going through that line. And so I began to remind our workers, our work matters because you're putting those folks off on the right foot to serve the public. All these essential workers are coming to us because you're also an essential worker. The government thinks your work matters to help all these other people. We also had a big Amazon delivery facility literally right across the street from our business. And so I was like, these Amazon deliveries, for so many who have risk factors during COVID, right? Who can't go out of the house, those deliveries are absolutely critical lifelines, right? And you're fueling the drivers that give those critical lifelines. All of a sudden, frontline coffee shop workers feel like their work matters. And do you know what? They came to work faithfully. I think our actual attendance during the pandemic was better than it was prior to the pandemic because we were able to just convey and really live out, and it was genuine, that the work we did matters. So figure out why that work matters for that new hire as you move them from recruit to onboard. Second example, in our cleaning business, again, who thinks of cleaning as really mattering? But we had a specific account where people were able to give blood as well as, and this was really cool, it at the time was the largest facility where they harvested organ and tissue donations. So in other words, when you check on your driver's license that you want to be an organ or a tissue donor, this was the place where the cadavers would come and all those useful parts will be harvested. Now you talk about critical work going on in that building, literally life-saving work when people need a kidney or a heart or any of the other skin after a burn. And you can say to your workers, we're doing the work to keep this place clean to the standard of 1/10,000th of a particle so that those things can be harvested and not rejected, so that that cadaver body isn't given in vain, so that it can save the next life of the person, maybe your neighbor or your friend, or even a family member who was in a car crash or who was in a fire. All of a sudden, frontline cleaning work that didn't seem to matter a few minutes ago, now that work matters. And so they began to take that to heart, that what I'm doing here is important. I know most of the world might frown upon it or say it's somehow less than, but this is meaningful work. And I matter because I'm doing it. Even in hospitality, and that's a tough industry, right? It's hard to get people, I've talked about this, but hard to get people to do the back of house, food service stuff, hard to get people to do front desk and housekeeping and all the things that go into hospitality. But when you can say, hey, you're the dishwasher here, but if you don't get all the plates and all the silverware and the glassware ready, this wedding isn't going to go off. This important wedding that people have planned and dreamed of since they were just, preschool, like dreaming of being that Cinderella bride, right? And saying to that dishwasher, you have an important part. When you put out a perfectly glistening clean plate and they can cut the cake and slide that cake on there, that's really cool. And I know you're not in the room, you're in the back, half soaking with dish tank water, right? But you're in that room, in that plate, in that fork, in that champagne flute that they raise and say, let's raise a toast to grandma and grandpa on their 70th wedding anniversary. And everyone gets chills down their spine. You have a place in that. If you can, in this process between recruiting and getting them on board, convey why you hired them, but also convey why the work they are about to embark on matters, you have an infinitely better chance that they are going to come back on day 2, on day 3, week 2, week 3, week 4, versus you bring them on board. It's a clunky process where the recruiter disappears. They never see them again. Some random person they've never met meets them in the lobby and it's awkward. And there's awkward small talk about the weather or the latest Bengals loss. And then you're like, why am I even washing dishes here? Why am I cleaning this building? This seems silly. I don't need to do this. And so you fade away, right? And then from the turnover process, you flushed all this recruiting money and you flush all that onboarding money, and you're back to square one, having to spend it all again on the next person. So remember, let them know why you hired them, but also When you do this handoff, do it cleanly. Have the recruiter, again, tell them why you value them. Hand them to the trainer. Let the trainer tell them why the work matters. And if you really want to go above and beyond for extra credit, tell that new hire how you see their skill set and their abilities and their passions merging with the critical work that your organization does in the world. And if you can do that, you are well on your way to onboarding your next great hire. If you have any questions about turnover and you're just struggling with this, I would love to help you out. I can jump in and really make a difference. We can get this thing turned around in Q4 and you can launch in 2026. So thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped Business Podcast, and I will see you next time. If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on Super Pumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. And if you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness. Today, I want to talk about the Goldilocks training rule. And that may seem silly to think about a children's book helping you slay the turnover dragon and increase profits to levels maybe you've never seen, and to finally start building the type of business, the type of organization you want. For those of you who don't know the story of Goldilocks, it's a story of a little girl, and she is somewhere out in the woods. I'm not sure why she's out in the woods or why she's out in the woods alone, but she is. She goes to the house of three bears. And in that house, the first thing she does is they have made some porridge and they have let that porridge cool. And she goes to the first bowl of porridge and it is way too hot. It burns her tongue. Then she goes to the second bowl of porridge and it's cold. Nobody likes cold porridge. Yuck, right? And she goes to the third bowl of porridge and it is just right. Then she's like, that was pretty good. I have full belly full of porridge. And like many of us, like this bear particularly, you want a nice comfortable chair, right? After you've had your porridge. Think about after Sunday dinner, right? She goes to the first chair and it's uncomfortable. And then she goes to the second chair and that one's not comfortable either. Maybe a little too small and just not right. And she goes to the third chair and it fits just perfectly. And she's like sitting in that chair, relaxing. And then pretty soon you've relaxed in the chair, you've had your porridge, and then you need a little nap, right? She goes to the beds and she goes to the first bed and it's way too big and it's just uncomfortable. She's swimming in it. And then she goes to the second one. And if you've ever been in a bed that's too small, your feet are popping out the end. Hey, maybe you've cuddled with one of your kids when they can't get back to sleep or they have a nightmare. You lay in there, your calf on down to your feet are out, no blankets, you're freezing, it's miserable. So the second bed for Goldilocks isn't good. And so finally then she finds the third bed and it's just right. Then she's just comfortably sleeping and all of a sudden the bears come back and they're mad and they end up coming in the house and she gets startled and she runs off, and according to the story, they never see her again and she never goes there again. As we think about this in the process of turnover, the training portion is where people begin to feel out whether they're comfortable somewhere, whether they can do the job they need to do, and how to do that. And if you mess this up, just like Goldilocks, they're going to run away and never come back. All that money you've invested in the recruiting phase and the initial onboarding, that's all going to go by the wayside, and you're going to be back to square one trying to get those people into your organization. Specifically, as we think about Goldilocks, a lot of the stuff she found was either too hot or too cold, too big or too small, just not comfortable. And it's the same thing with training. What I find is the amount of training we do, we have to get that just right sweet spot. Specifically, the way I see it is, and this is how it played out in my business, as we bring someone on board, right? If we give them too little training, if we just bring them in and say, this is the job, it's like giving them too cold porridge. It just doesn't taste good and they're not quite sure what to do. And you know what happens pretty quickly? If you just throw them into the deep end of the pool with no life preserver, no training, no swimming ability, they're going to drown. They're going to be no use to your company. I find that a lot of companies just throw people in without enough training, so it doesn't work out. But the second problem is that people get trainer help or trainer subsidy too long. If you have a trainer for too long, you begin to think there's no way one person can do this because I've been with Tom the trainer for the last 2 weeks and it's taken Tom the trainer and myself both to do this job. So there's no way I can do this myself. Now, I've seen this play out in my own businesses, but I've also seen this play out with my special needs brother, Tony. Tony, because he's special needs and is in certain programs for people with developmental disabilities, he has had many trainers over the years. He went to one place, it was a hotel. He had a trainer for a very short period of time, and then he was expected to do this like 7-page list of things in the hotel, and he has limited reading ability, and he just couldn't do it, and it stressed him out. And then his boss was mad. Tony, why aren't you doing this? But he just didn't get properly trained. He wasn't able to do it, and pretty quickly he washed out of that job. Then he's also had other jobs where he had a trainer for way too long. He had a trainer at one job for 2.5 months. He got pretty happy only doing a third or half, or maybe a little more than half the job, while the trainer did the other half the job. But that became his routine. He began to believe he could only do part of the job and he needed the trainer to do the rest. He never ramped up to full productivity. After 2.5 months, the trainer left and he couldn't get it rolling enough to do the whole job. The employer said, we put 2.5 months of training into this kid and he still can't get the job. So you're fired. All that time, think about 2.5 months of training, and he went by the wayside. You have got to figure out in your business how long to train people. In our cleaning business, we had a very simple rule. By the end of 1 week, we wanted that person fully trained up. We did a 20, 40, 60, 80, 100% rule, meaning on a 5-day work week, on day one, we were only expecting roughly 20% output from that person. And the other 80% of the job was being done by other people, including the trainer. Then on day 2, we doubled the amount of stuff we'd taught them that they were doing, and all of a sudden they're doing 40% of the job. And then on day 3, they're doing 60% of the job, day 4, 80%, and day 5, finally close to 100%, maybe not quite 100%. But what we found was if we threw them in and we said in 1 day or 2 days, you need to do this whole thing, they were overwhelmed. And when people get overwhelmed in the training process as you're onboarding them, they're going to quit. But on the other hand, just like Tony, we found that if we stuck a trainer with them too long, they began to think, this is impossible. I have a trainer and me, and it's taken 2 of us to do this job. There is no way I can get through all of that on my own. We realized you need to subsidize the amount of work that's going to be done for a period of time. And for each business, that's going to vary. But the thing I want you to do as an employer of choice is I want you to really actively work at that process and garner feedback from your employees. Maybe you're holding their hand too long, or maybe you're not holding their hand long enough. This is the Goldilocks principle. When it comes to training, you want to get it just right. You don't want to come in too hot, but you don't want to come in too cold. And if you do, good things will happen. Now, final note, going back to the Goldilocks story, sometimes we let that person have the keys to the castle, right? And we let them then do their thing and they're feeling their way. And Goldilocks was in that house feeling pretty good. She tried some things that didn't work and some other things that didn't work, but she'd found those sweet spots. The bears came in and they were all riled up and they were carrying on, causing a ruckus, and they scared Goldilocks. I see that with training where we get someone settled in and we think we have it just right. And then we come back, maybe something small or maybe even large goes awry. And we come in like a thundering herd of bears. And we're like, this wasn't right. And I thought we trained you better. You need to do this better. You know what they do? They freak out. And they're like, I don't like this place. They're scared of me. They bail. And then guess what? You are out of a person. So as you begin to train people, I want you to actively work on the Goldilocks principle. I want you to work on getting it just right. Not too hot, not too cold, but make that employee comfortable. Make them feel like they fit in the bed, they fit in the chair, and the porridge you have created for them is perfect. Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped Business Podcast. If you want help with any of the process of recruiting, onboarding, or retaining your employees so that you make more profit and increase your retention, hit me up. I'd love to talk to you. I'll see you next time. If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on Super Pumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. And if you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness. Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped Business Podcast. And we continue our series on how you slay the turnover dragon, how you reduce turnover in your business so that you boost your profits, boost your happiness, and have the business that you really want in your life. And so there's kind of three parts to reducing turnover. The first part is really getting after it when it comes to recruiting. And there's a whole section on that. Go back to previous episodes about that. But then the bridge between recruiting and retaining great workers is your onboarding and training process. And the very first part of that is onboarding means get them on board. That is a kind of a precarious time where people are feeling you out as employees, whether they want to stay with your company, whether they want to jump to a different offer, just all of that. Last week, we talked about in training, the Goldilocks principle. And just a quick review, but go back if you didn't catch that episode. The Goldilocks principle with training is you want to support them and train them and give them that training love long enough that they feel comfortable doing the job, but not so long that they come to believe that they can't do it on their own because they've been doing it with a trainer too long. And I share a couple stories about my brother as well as a couple of stories from my own businesses. So the Goldilocks principle of training is make that porridge, that training porridge, just right. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right down the middle. Today, I want to talk about the 3 T's of training. And this is something I have learned the hard way in my own businesses. Often we miss our own blind spots. We operate as if the entire world operates with our same mindset. But the reality is that isn't the case. What I find with trainers is trainers often operate out of the same mindset that they have in their life. There are 3 T's to training. And another way of putting it is there are 3 ways that employees, as you onboard them, begin to get comfortable and productive in your business. So for me, as a hard-charging type A grinder, right? In my training, what do I want to focus on with a trainee? I want to focus on tasks, right? I want to focus on this is the work that we have hired you to do. This is what you are doing and how you are going to do it, right? And if we equip you to be able to do those tasks well, you're going to feel confident in our business and you're going to be able to be a productive worker. So often we think of training kind of as creating a widget, that a widget can, clean a building or make a latte or run the proper profit and loss reports or process payroll for us on a weekly basis or whatever that role is for our company. And that all comes down to those tasks, which somebody's going to perform. And so I would say that most companies, when they hand off a new onboarded employee to a trainer, that trainer is focused on tasks. And as a trainer myself, that's where I really put a lot of my emphasis. But what I've learned over time is that just mastering the tasks for a new employee is not enough, because there are two other T's that for many new employees matter more than the actual tasks. So beyond the tasks, you have got to train up your people on the terrain. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is the physical layout of your business, your facility. This doesn't apply as much if you're virtual or online, but if you have a physical property where you operate and where you're expecting this new hire to operate, you have got to get them comfortable with the lay of the land. So they need to know when they come on that first day, where do they put their lunch? Where's the bathroom? Heaven knows we don't go 8 or 10 hours without going to the restroom, right? So where's the restroom? If they're a smoker, where do they go out to smoke? Where is it allowed to smoke? Where are they not allowed to smoke? Where do they park their car? Do they park right up front in the CEO's spot, or are they off in some satellite lot because that's for the customers and there's a parking shortage? So where does that occur? Then where's your office? If they need help, where do they go? Or where do they go for HR? Or all of those things. They need to know the lay of the land. In our commercial cleaning business, we often had cleaners who did a specialized task. So they might just dust or they might just do restrooms. Well, we had one particular account. It was actually a large vocational school. There were 4 different buildings on that campus. And so those cleaners were expected to navigate 4 different buildings as they cleaned. Well, in each of those buildings, one, they've got to learn where they go in because not all doors are unlocked. Then they've got to learn where's the cleaning closet. Then they've got to learn, where is the supply closet, which is often different than the cleaning closet, where they get backup toilet paper, paper towels, or trash bags, that kind of thing. So they need to learn that. And then where are the actual restrooms located within that building? If all you're doing is teaching people the tasks, here's how you clean a restroom. You're going to start with the mirror and then the sink, and then you're going to clean the toilets, and then you're going to sweep the floor, and then you're going to mop the floor, and then you're going to empty the trash and put a wet floor sign down at the entrance to the restroom. If all you teach them is the tasks, but they are overwhelmed with the terrain, in other words, they're like, well, I would do a good job, but I don't know where the cleaning closet is here. Think about that. You throw them in there and you say, okay, these are the tasks. Do you understand it? And they show you they can do the tasks, but then they can't find all the restrooms, or there's an executive restroom located in room 301 in the very back, and it's a private unisex restroom, and that gets missed every day. Guess what happens? You start getting customer complaints, and you know what your manager does? They come down on that employee and they say, come on, we trained you on how to clean a restroom, and you haven't cleaned this restroom in forever. Do you know where the gap is? The gap is in the fact that you didn't teach them the terrain. And oftentimes what I found is people need to know that terrain before they can actually start being productive on the tasks. Initially, as a trainer, I started out just fixated on tasks as I onboarded people. Then I was like, oh, they need to understand the building. They need to know where they're going to perform said tasks. But there was a third blind spot that I had that thankfully my wife was very helpful in enlightening me on. And that third part of training, and this is a critical one for us, is called the tribe. Now, what do I mean by the tribe? What I mean by the tribe is these are the people and the players that work alongside that new employee. And there are people who are very relational, such as my wife, who are less interested in the tasks or even learning the building. They want to know who's in that building. So the first thing they want to do is learn names and learn positions and learn who works there and how many kids they have and what their hobbies are and what they love about the company. Until they get comfortable with who they're working with, They're not particularly interested in the tasks or even the terrain. And yet, so often, at least for me early on, I was banging my head against the wall because I'm like, why are these people washing out? And what I came to realize was we weren't acclimating them, we weren't onboarding them to the rest of the tribe. Maybe their break in the break room, instead of being 10 minutes and getting to know two people, maybe for someone whose mindset is all about tribe and the people they're working with, maybe you need to spend 30 minutes in the break room and introduce them to 5 or 6 or 7 people each night. So they get to know those folks. They begin to form human connections. They begin to feel comfortable with that organization and the people that make it up. If you want to onboard your people, you have got to remember the 3 T's of training. There are the tasks, which most of us focus on. There is the terrain, which we put less focus on, but equally important. And the third and forgotten piece, that critical T, if you want to slay the turnover dragon, is helping your new hires feel a part of the tribe, feel connected to the rest of the tribe. If you can equip your people with understanding and feeling confident in the tasks, the terrain, and the tribe, you are on your way to having them not only make it through that first day and that first week and that first month, but keeping them for that first year and even that first decade. If you need help in your business slaying the turnover dragon, onboarding your people, training them up, and getting them productive long-term assets, hit me up. I'd love to talk. I'll see you next time. Along this journey, I'm not just seeking adventure and renewal. I'm carving out space we so often don't have, to think about and to ponder and to meditate and to pray on life's bigger questions. What is the meaning of life? Where does God exist? Does God exist? How do I fit into the cosmos? What is my purpose? These things that so often we just can't even take the time to put the mental energy into. I have 40 days to dig into that. And along the way, I hope I can muster the courage to be vulnerable, to share some of those struggles that I'll be going through, and also some of the cool discoveries and thoughts and adventures that come my way. I would be so grateful if you told your friends about it, and also if you subscribed or followed us so that you don't miss future episodes. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day super pumped adventure in the wilderness. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you tomorrow.